Hello, everyone, and welcome to another special episode of the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast here on the Selection Sunday edition of the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast. We are here, first time in 2 years that we are going to have a bracket to break down, and there is no better feeling than just watching that Selection Sunday show and seeing all those team names pop up. And I'm here today to dissect the bracket. I want to go over everything that stood out to me and everything that, when the bracket came out, I want to tell you guys what came to mind, and I'm not going to be doing that alone. As a friend of the show will be joining me today, my guy, Chad Boyles. And Chad, it's funny because the one thing about college basketball that makes this sport so crazy is that I feel like time just flies. We were here a week ago going over the conference tournaments, getting ready for it, and I had some strong opinions on many teams going into that conference tournament week. And after watching another week of basketball and seeing this bracket, like, my opinions have changed, and I'm looking at this tournament bracket right now and seeing, wow, like, yeah, we know there are a handful of teams that have separated themselves among everyone else, but there is really no difference between being like a 3 seed or a 6 seed or a 7 seed or an 8 seed, and that's the one thing when I look at this bracket that comes to mind.
Yeah, same. Like, and we've been talking about it all season, how wide open the season was going to be, how unpredictable it was going to be, and this bracket and the way it looks is really a lot of the same notions. I got so many opinions on so many of the different seedings, and really, like, you know, we could see some crazy stuff happen early on in this tournament.
Definitely, man. So the first thing I want to do on today's show is talk about the bubble a little bit. I am going to talk with Chad about the bubble and which teams we think got the right side of the draw, the wrong side of the draw. We'll dissect the committee's decisions on that. And then following the bubble, I wanted to go around each region and really tell you guys what stood out to me, which teams we thought got favorable draws and things of that nature. And yeah, that's what we'll be doing today. Let's start things off with the bubble. And Chad, when I look at this bubble, I think a couple storylines going into the Selection Sunday when it came to the bubble was, okay, if any team gets left out of the tournament and they're just like flat out complaining, then it has to be a special circumstance for me to say, like, oh, like, they have a real right to be upset. Like Michigan State, if they would have gotten left out, I would have not been too thrilled about that. But the one thing that stands out to me is Syracuse and Utah State. These were two teams that were squarely on the bubble going into this Selection Sunday. And not only are both in, but both avoided the playing games. Both got safely in, and Louisville is the first team that is out. We're going to explain the 4 COVID replacement teams for anyone who's unsure of that in a little bit. But when you look at this bubble, Chad, what comes to mind for you?
Really, 2 things stand out, and that's how really the committee had been wary of the situation regarding teams like Utah State, teams like Drake, Wichita State, these mid-majors in many circumstances getting recognition over teams like Louisville, who struggled to really gain traction at any point this season, COVID-related or not. And then I also see people rejecting the Michigan State thing, and kind of shocked, but that doesn't make any sense to me. I think Michigan State deserves to be in. I think they have the quality wins that would register them as a tournament team, also playing in the best conference in college basketball. That's not a decision they make, and I thought they've showed improvement throughout the season, and I thought that was right. As for the first 4 out, the same thing, you know. I've never, you know me well, and you know that I'm a fan of recognizing the mid-major and stuff like that. Giving Drake and Utah State, although they're not for the last 4 in, but like you were just mentioning, I appreciate that, and I understand it, and I like it. Louisville, it's a weird season, played less games, that kind of thing, and the committee recognized that and saw it, and although it's fair or not, is a different conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So a couple things for me. Number one, I think that when you look at a team like Drake, I think they had a very complicated resume. Because number one, I think when they were fully healthy and they were buzzing, like, they were no doubt a tournament team. They had a really nice win against Loyola Chicago. But the problem I have is 2 of their players have gotten hurt since. And even though they might deserve to be in the NCAA tournament, no one is going to sit here and tell you that that team is going to beat Louisville. And I understand, as you said, giving the mid-major a chance. I think that Utah State is absolutely one of the best 68 teams in the country. They deserve to get in. I think they're a real threat to possibly win a game or two. But I think that I was fascinated how the committee let Louisville out because they really did not show any high regards for the ACC. Syracuse, they get in as avoiding the last four, which was interesting to me. Wichita State, who suffered a tough loss against Cincinnati during conference tournament week. I think that if they didn't win the American, they're not in. They're another team that I think they deserve a lot of credit for the season they've had, the circumstances that have gone down. But at the same time, like, they're not better than Louisville. I thought for a second that UCLA might have been out. I think their resume is just as bad, if not worse, than Louisville. So I think they were a little bit lucky to get in. But when I saw Syracuse and Utah State pop up as not only in, but safely in, that was surprising to me because coming into the selection show, the only team I had off, I had Utah State out and Louisville in. So that was a surprise to me.
Yeah, and good that you mentioned UCLA. I didn't really get to that, but they're a team that I got to watch as much as I watched any team in the Pac-12, and yeah, that's surprising, and there is a little bit of a nudge there against the ACC. So I think UCLA is a question mark, but again, you look at the first four out, and it's really interesting list. Other than Louisville, you got Colorado State, St. Louis, and who was the other one?
Ole Miss, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really a weird situation, and no matter how you toss and turn it, you get these conversations every year. I would have liked to see some teams in, some teams out. Syracuse getting the Syracuse treatment or whatever we want to call that.
Yeah, dude, totally. I think that when you look at the teams that are in the last four out, just in case anyone doesn't know, if anyone pulls out of the tournament due to any COVID-related issues, then those four teams are going to be waiting on deck to take their spot. It's a weird situation. It's almost like they're rooting for another team to get COVID, which is, an interesting situation there. But I do think, like, Colorado State, I think that teams like Georgetown and Oregon State winning their conference tournaments, like, I think Colorado State could have easily gotten in, but it just pushed them out. And it's funny, like, we're all sitting here thinking that, okay, Georgetown is out here winning the Big East tournament, does not knock out Syracuse. I think we were all maybe hoping for that to happen, maybe some poetic justice. But unfortunately, as we know, Syracuse gets the right end of the stick. But, yeah, dude, I think when you look at the bubble also, what do you think about this Michigan State-UCLA game? This is going to be one of the most hyped-up first four games because the casual college basketball fan is going to look at that game and say, wow, Michigan State and UCLA, those two teams are out here playing each other. Like, that is a great game. And the thing about UCLA is this. I was very high on the Bruins going into the season. I predicted them to win the Pac-12, and I like Mick Cronin as a coach. People forget UCLA, when the season shut down last year, was probably the hottest team in college basketball. They would have made the tournament. But Chris Smith, a guy who decided to come back to UCLA, he could have easily went to the NBA. That's how good of a player he is. He decided to come back for this season to Westwood because he knew this team could be special. And it's super unfortunate that he tore his ACL in about early January, and the Bruins haven't really been the same team since. But they're still a tough team. Like, they got some talent. I love Tiger Campbell. He's a really unselfish point guard. Jaime Jaquez is a good glue guy. The Bruins have been struggling of late, losing to Oregon State in the Pac-12 tournament. And then you have Michigan State, a team that, as we both mentioned, like, I don't know how they're in this playing game when they have wins over Illinois. They have a win over Michigan. They have a win against Ohio State. And, like, how is Syracuse in over them in safely? I don't really get that. But at the same time, I do think that Michigan State, UCLA, that will be a pretty fun game. Any thoughts on that one?
Absolutely, and it's so unconventional the way that it's playing out. Duke and Kentucky don't make the tournament, and Michigan State and UCLA in playing games. It's freaking weird. But, yeah, and these are two teams that play very similar, in your face, to get the pace going a little bit styles. And both teams have, of course, gone over their ups and downs this season. And it's really interesting. Like we've always said about the Pac-12, some people don't want to shine their light that way, but it's a good conference. And looking at the tournament, and should tell you that. Even Oregon State winning, and that was a game that UCLA could have won, and
they should have won.
And so it's going to be an exciting game, and I think whatever team wins that one will really give BYU some trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's cool to see Tom Izzo in this underdog role because, look, I don't know how you were feeling about Michigan State going into the season. I was a little concerned about their point guard situation, but they have some dudes. They got Rocket Watts, Joey Hauser. They have a freshman in A.J. Hogard who's playing a little bit better as of late. I'm excited for that one. And, and we also have Wichita State and Drake, a former Missouri Valley rivalry. These two teams are going to clash. And once again, when it comes to Wichita State, I think they're a very vulnerable team, but at the same time, they deserve credit for being here. The fact that everything that happened with Greg Marshall, it happened very quickly, especially for a successful coach that did as much as he did in Wichita. And this guy, Isaac Brown, comes in, and he has this team winning the AAC and in the tournament year one. I think he deserves a lot of credit. I think this is a wide-open game. Like, this is the definition of a coin flip game. We saw Drake against Loyola play well once again. That was with Roman Penn. He is not going to be playing. So any thoughts on this one? Winner gets USC?
Yeah, and what really sticks out is that Wichita State's coming off a bad loss, a loss in the conference tournament that they were favored to win, and they're gonna have a little chip on their shoulder. And all credit to Isaac Brown, he's rallied the troops, he's done everything the school could ask of him. 16-5 record, and then you got Drake, a team that started the season on fire, went through some adversity, and lost a couple games to end the season, but still got in, got that respect for how they start and how they were playing earlier. So yeah. This is an exciting game, too, and it's kind of funny because you look at the records of Wichita State and Drake and their seasons, and then Michigan State and UCLA and their seasons, and it's kind of like we get the best of both worlds in these first four games.
Oh, definitely, man. I'm really excited for both games, to be honest with you, and I think both could be, whoever wins, could be a real threat to go even further in the tournament. The other comment about the bubble I want to run by you, and then we'll move on to breaking down the bracket, is this. So, throughout the regular season, I don't know where you stood on this, but I actually was thinking that there was a chance that the Mountain West could have a 4-bid NCAA tournament. I thought that San Diego State was obviously a tournament team, but when I watched Utah State, when I watched Boise State for a good portion of the season until recently, and when I watched Colorado State, I think Coach Medved has done a phenomenal job there. Those teams were looking like tournament teams to me. But listen to this. Apparently, they did not have any games scheduled for the week prior to conference tournament week, so the conference themselves made Boise State make up a game against Fresno State, and they made Colorado State make up a road game against Nevada. Both teams lost, and I think ultimately that's what could have cost them a couple tournament bids. Now, luckily, Utah State ended up getting in and safely in. They avoided the playing game, and once again, I love Craig Smith. I think Cada is a pro. I think they're a phenomenal team, but I was worried about their placement going into this selection Sunday. So when you look at the Mountain West, I think it's cool to have two teams in the tournament, but you could have done better, and as a big-time college basketball fan, how much money and revenue you earn for your conference when a small school goes to the tournament. Yeah,
and it's always been a talented conference, and we've always seen that kind of, there's the Mountain West is always exciting, and teams don't always get the recognition, so it's cool. And we know the prowess of San Diego State last year. I was texting you about them and how we like their odds in this tournament. They're a good team. And then it seems like there's always that one seed, and then Boise State's always in the mix, and you got these Utah States and Colorado States that are really, really respectable programs. And I think I read something about Boise State that, maybe that they didn't get the credit that they deserved in being in the bubble conversation as much as they should have been. So yeah, it's cool, and me especially, in conferences like that, Conference USA, and I love that stuff, and these are teams that are good and capable of beating others.
Absolutely. So I think the bubble, it was a very complicated bubble this year. I think that separating some of these teams were really, really hard, but ultimately, I think the committee did a good job with the bubble teams. I think Michigan State deserved to get in, albeit in the first four. Syracuse, I had as one of my last two teams in. Look, they looked like a tournament team the last couple weeks of the season. I don't know if their resume necessarily showed it, but we'll see what they could do. And Utah State, I'm happy they got in as well. So that's it for the bubble. Let's break down some of these regions, and we'll start off with the West region, the number one seed, Gonzaga. And Chad, the first thing that comes to mind when I look at this region is Gonzaga got what I think to be a pretty favorable draw. You look at the 2, 3, 4 seeds in their region. They have Iowa as the 2 seed, Kansas as the 3 seed, and Virginia as the 4 seed. And the unique thing about each of those 3 teams is Gonzaga handled each and every one of them during the non-conference portion of their schedule. So I think Gonzaga got a pretty solid draw, but there are other ways to look at it. You could say, okay, you beat all those teams once already. If any of those teams are as good as their seeding, maybe they'll find a way to respond. But overall, would you say Gonzaga got a pretty good draw?
Absolutely, and I think if you look at the bracket, I mean, there can be questions raised about, what they were handed versus what others, but they are the number 1 overall seed. I like the depth of the region, though. I can't lie. I love USC as a 6th seed. I think they could be a serious threat against in the tournament and have possibilities and maybe making some noise. Creighton, I think Creighton is a good 5 seed. They're coming off a terrible loss, but they've had such a respectable season to that point that, would be deserving of higher than a 5 seed should they have not lost to Georgetown the way they did. And then even some of the lower seeds. We were talking about Ohio yesterday, teams like that. So it's deep. Not necessarily anybody there to contest Gonzaga for me, but it'll be fun to watch, but definitely favorable for the Bulldogs.
A couple of things that stand out. So one thing that's very special about this NCAA tournament, as we all know, is that it's all in one place. And I think that actually had a little bit of an impact on this bracket, because this is the first time where when the committee is seeding these teams, there is no geographic advantage or disadvantage. When we have each of these regional finals in different states and different regions all across the country, you're going to want to group the teams on the West Coast a little bit closer to each other. And I think this year we saw the committee just flat out seed these teams like 1-68. And we're seeing Gonzaga, I think, as you said, got a pretty favorable draw. Now, Iowa is a team that could always do damage. We know how good their offense is. But as we said, you don't want to get into a track meet game with Gonzaga. We saw how that played out for Iowa the first time. I like Kansas. They're being a little undervalued right now, but they're just in shambles. Between Jalen Wilson being out in the first game and also David McCormick, the unknown of whether he's going to play in the NCAA tournament or not, Virginia, we don't necessarily trust them. I think that when I look at this bracket, dude, Oregon strikes me as the team that could be the number 1 threat to Gonzaga as a number 7 seed. I think they're a team that when we look at these resumes, right, we have to evaluate teams and where they stand now. And I think sometimes people get away from that because of the seeding. But all I know is that Oregon, one of their most important players, Will Richardson, he was injured for a large portion of the first half of the season. And since he's been back, Oregon is 11-3. I trust Dana Altman as a coach in the tournament. And I think that when you look at Gonzaga's biggest threat, I think that Iowa and Kansas are not really there. I think USC could be. If they get there, I think that a potential USC-Oregon Sweet 16 game to showcase the Pac-12, that would be pretty good, seeing Evan Mobley and Chris Duarte going back and forth, going at it. And I think that when you look at both of those two teams' athleticism and size, if you ask me who is Gonzaga's biggest threat in this region, I'm actually going to point to one of those 2 Pac-12 teams.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I won't reveal any secrets about my bracket, but I could definitely see it playing out that way. I love USC and Oregon the same way, like we just said. The Pac-12 goes very undervalued when you're discussing Power 5 conferences. But those are good teams. And Oregon, USC, Colorado, these are some teams that are capable of making some noise from lower seeding positions in the tournament. So it's exciting.
Absolutely. Another pod I want to talk to you about is that 5-12-4-13. We have Creighton as the 5, UCSB as a 12, Virginia as a 4, and Ohio as a 13. And dude, when I talk about the NCAA tournament and how this year, especially in these games like 4-13, 5-12, seeding doesn't matter, I got to be honest with you, I think that each one of these teams has about a 25% chance to make the Sweet 16. I'm leaning towards the winner of Creighton UCSB. I think that Santa Barbara is really good. They have some high major talent on that team. Joe Pasternak has done a really good job there in the Big West Conference, being led by Ja'Cory McLaughlin, the former Oregon State point guard. He gets buckets for that team. As you said with Creighton, it was obviously a questionable loss to Georgetown, but we know that these guys came back to Creighton this year to perform in the NCAA tournament and make a deep, deep run. And I still think that when they're playing to their best of their ability, they're capable of that. I know that a lot of people are picking the Ohio over Virginia upset, and I totally understand why. But at the same time, I don't feel that comfortable just bailing on Tony Bennett like this quickly. Like, they still are the defending NCAA tournament champs, and I understand they haven't been the vintage Virginia of the past, but when you look at their defense and how historically it has fared against mid-majors, they've really been able to take advantage. I know they lost to UMBC, I get it, but at the same time, like, Tony Bennett, that's a very good and well-coached team. I think that really when you look at this bracket with Ohio with the kid Preston, he's phenomenal as well. I think that this bracket is wide open, that region, the 5-12, 4-13, and we could see any one of those four come out.
Yeah, and it's funny because you look at Ohio and UC Santa Barbara and how they won their conferences, and the UC Santa Barbara was number 1 seed in theirs, and Ohio was 5th seeded in theirs, or whatever it was. And these teams just totally run the table. And I've seen a lot of Buffalo play, being a New York native. I've seen Buffalo play. I know some guys on the team, and they beat Buffalo down, and it was a very good performance. Same with UC Santa Barbara, playing the 2 seed UC, totally dominated.
That's a coach that knows how to win in the tournament, Russ Turner at UC Irvine. Yeah,
that's right. He's been there before. And then you look at Creighton coming off a terrible loss in ugly fashion, and then you got Virginia, who is not meeting for practice. They're doing it virtually due to this COVID situation. Interesting.
Yeah.
And so it's really like, I've never been a fan of playing a team coming off a 30-point loss, knowing how good they can be, because when you have a coach like Creighton does and all of that, it like, he's going to have them ready to play. I love UC Santa Barbara, though. They have a kid, Ja'Cory McLaughlin, his name is. Very exciting guard. Very well coached. And same with Ohio and Jason Preston, a story that I'm sure most of us have heard about. And you're absolutely spot on. I mean, I also love Tony Bennett, so I'm not going to abandon ship there yet. And same with Creighton. But, I mean, those are definitely games to look forward to, as are the rest of the 5-12, 13, or 3-14 matchups.
I think another thing about Ohio is everyone is going to look at the kid Preston, I get it, but this is a team that has 5 double-digit scores, including a kid by the name of Ben Vanderplas. I think that is going to be a kid that we have to keep our eyes out on because he is a really good stretch power forward for this team, and he can make shots from the outside. He's a big impact player. I think Ohio is going to be a team that people are going to watch and say, wow, these guys are really fun to watch. I think that pod of those 4 teams could be really, really exciting. The other quick question I have for this region, Oklahoma and Missouri. These are 2 teams that, even though they are lined up in the 8-9 game, we both saw at some point or another this season, both of these teams approaching top 10. So we know that they could do it. They have some talent. Oklahoma and Missouri both have not really been playing well as of late. But when you look at those 2 teams, which team do you think you have more confidence in possibly giving Gonzaga a little bit of a run? Because I do think when I say, oh, Gonzaga got a favorable draw compared to everyone else, that includes the 8-9 game. When we look at some of these other matchups, we see teams that scare us. I don't think Oklahoma or Missouri is necessarily going to say, wow, like that team could beat Gonzaga. But at the same time, they've had their moments.
Yeah, and if I had to point the finger at one of those 2 teams to, bet my life on beating Gonzaga, I'd probably lean towards Oklahoma. This is a team that, although they ended the regular season on a very slippery note, beat 3 top 10 ranked teams earlier in the season. We know how good they can be. We've underestimated them before. I've underestimated them. And so that would have to be my bet between the 2. Although I do love Missouri, I love the way that they play. I love the trajectory their season was at when they were 13-3. It looked good, and but yeah, I'd have to go with the Sooners in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking at this region for a couple more minutes, when you look at Iowa, I think that when we look at the Hawkeyes, I have more confidence in them right now heading into the tournament than I would have expected myself to at the start of the regular season. But at the same time, I still have not seen Fran McCaffrey and a team he's coached like go to the Sweet 16 and make a deep run. And when I see some of the other coaches and some of the other teams in this region, I mean, even VCU, I think they could play. They're very aggressive. I like Bones Highland, Mike Rhodes. I think they do a good job there. Oregon, we know the success Dana Altman has had in this tournament. USC is a team that probably has the best big man in college basketball. Kansas, this isn't your vintage Kansas team, but man, Bill Self, there have been so many times where I turn my back against Kansas and he just pulls one out of the hat because he is just such a good coach. I think he's an underrated coach. So when you look at that bottom part of the bracket and you see Iowa and some of the other teams that could stand in their way, if you're a Hawkeye fan, how are you feeling going into this tournament? Because I think your expectations should be get to the Elite Eight at least.
Yeah, I agree. And we've already touched on Oregon and USC, and those are two teams that are capable of beating just about anybody on their best night. And we know the lapses that Iowa is capable of having. We've seen them lose some games. I mean, when they lost to Illinois twice, that loss to Michigan was an ugly one. So we know what they can look like. That being said, when Iowa plays their best basketball, they are one of the best teams in the nation, and it can be hard to get in their way. I would love to see an Evan Mobley, Luka Garza Sweet 16 game. I think that would be awesome.
Dude, so, yeah, I'm not going to lie. I think if we see that matchup, Mobley could give Garza fits. Like, he is just super lengthy, super athletic, and that is a bad matchup for Garza and Iowa. I'm not going to give anything away, but I'll say this. I don't see Iowa making the Elite Eight. I think one of Oregon, Kansas, or USC gets there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so any other thoughts on this West region before we move on?
No. I think there's a lot of storylines individually to look out for. Teams like Creighton and how they ended their tournament run, conference tournament.
Yeah.
And teams like USC and Oregon and teams that, ended on okay notes, but are very talented.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think the winner of Creighton and Santa Barbara will go to the Sweet 16. I think that, out of any game in this region, is the biggest 50-50 coin flip, because that is a good Power 5 against a good mid-major, which we can't really ask for in a 5-12 game. Like, we can't ask for more. I'm really excited for that one. Moving on to this East region. So, the number 1 seed is Michigan, and the Wolverines are coming into this tournament a little bit shorthanded with the news of Isaiah Livers getting injured in the Big Ten tournament. But at the same time, they still have some dudes. They got Dickinson and Wagner and Smith. They've had a really nice regular season, winning the Big Ten regular season title, and they hang on for a number 1 seed. But I think when you compare this region of any of the other regions, when you're comparing them, Michigan has a tough path. Alabama, Texas, Florida State, even LSU and St. Bonaventure in that 8-9 game. I think the winner of that game could give them trouble. I think that when I look at this East region, that's the number 1 thing that stands out to me, is that rightfully so, I guess, when we're ranking these teams, Michigan got a pretty tough draw, and I think they're vulnerable as a 1 seed. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a very interesting bracket as well, region as well, excuse me. I think LSU might have gotten the short end of the stick on some, seeding polls and all that. Got a lot of talent in the region. This is the Michigan State region. Maybe they could make some noise as an 11 seed. I'm not going to discredit that. I mean, it's a very interesting region. It's tough. Michigan, as good as they can be without Isaiah Livers, might be hard to garner some traction there. And then, like I said, I really like LSU, and I'm kind of shocked to see them as an 8 seed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that teams like Texas and Alabama have a real opportunity here to make some noise. And it's not going to be easy. Like, BYU, Michigan State, UCLA, whoever Texas plays, if they get past Abilene Christian, who could give them a game themselves, like, that is going to be a tough run for them. Alabama, they get Rick Pitino in Iona, who we're going to get into a little bit. They have Uconn and Maryland. Like, whoever wins that game, it's going to be a real physical basketball game that I think could maybe slow down Alabama and their speed a little bit. Then we have Florida State, who I was thinking could be a Final Four pick. By the way, they're playing the mid-major I was looking forward to picking the most in Greensboro, who has a pro on their team. But that's a tough matchup. You have LSU, who has pros on their team. I think this region is loaded, and it is very, very wide open because the 1 seed, unfortunately, as great as of a regular season Michigan had, I think that without Livers, they could rely on Dickinson a little bit too much. I think a guy like Franz Wagner is at his best when he is just shooting like 4 to 5 threes a game, playing good defense, but Livers, he had an insane season shooting the ball, and watching them against Ohio State, I'm not saying Michigan is bad by any means, but I just think they could take a little bit of a step down without Livers. Plus, even with him, the way they were playing going towards the regular season, like, even if they had him, LSU and St. Bonaventure, whoever wins that game is going to be a tough matchup for Michigan.
Yeah, I love that 8-9 matchup. Probably we'll get to...
Yeah, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, you look at that, and that's a really interesting matchup because LSU was very good, and they ended the season respectably. And we know about the talent they have on their team, and I've already voiced my opinion on, I think they might have gotten screwed a little bit by being an 8 seed, not a whole lot, but. And then you look at St. Bonaventure, and we're gonna maybe get into this coaching carousel thing. And this is Mark Schmidt was connected to the Boston College job hours ago, and so it's really interesting, and I like both those teams. They can both beat you in a number of ways, so I think Michigan could be in some trouble early.
Yeah, I think when you look at LSU, they are such a complicated team to get a read on because I'm not going to deny they have as good a top 4 as anyone. When you look at Watford, he was balling yesterday against Alabama. He could not miss. Javonte Smart, Cam Thomas, Darius Days, and Will Wade is a pretty good coach. I think people don't realize how good of a coach he is. And then you compare that to a St. Bonaventure team who won the A-10 regular season and conference tournament. I think they're really good. I think LSU's athleticism could overwhelm them a bit, but at the same time, LSU doesn't really play any defense, and I think Bonaventure could score a little bit on them. I think whoever wins that game is absolutely capable of giving Michigan a run. I think that is definitely a storyline to look out for. Another storyline that we have to talk about is Patrick Ewing and the Georgetown Hoyas, who take home the Big East tournament title, and they're in this NCAA tournament as a 12 seed, and I think they got a pretty good draw in Colorado. Now, I love McKinley Wright. He's phenomenal. I respect Chad Boyle, but here's the thing, dude. When you watch Georgetown, they're kind of like Michigan, but with worse players. They're a tough team that can make shots occasionally from the outside. They're physical, and I think that is kind of the team Colorado is. And the way Georgetown has been playing with some of the bodies on this team, I love Wahab. He is a very polished, skilled post player. They have a nice backup big in Egofe as well. The way Blair and the other guard, Harris, have been playing, I think that Georgetown could give Colorado a legit run. And watching Colorado lose to Oregon State, it hit me. They could lose to anyone on any night. So that is obviously a big storyline for the Hoyas.
Yeah, these are two teams that, are live and die by, Colorado especially, teams that live and die by their shooting percentages. And Georgetown has a terrific front line. We know that they're pretty good underneath, and we know the status of McKinley Wright. And this is going to be a good game, and it's a very interesting 5-12 because it's Colorado and Georgetown. Usually you get a mid-major or someone like that in that seed. So it's going to be fun to watch, and I know a lot of people are very excited to jump all over the Hoyas on this one. So, yeah, definitely just another 5-12 to look out for.
Yeah, let me ask you, Chad, when you were watching Georgetown run through that Big East tournament, what came to mind for you? Because the thing for me that's always been crazy with Georgetown, really since Patrick Ewing has taken over, is they've never really made the NCAA tournament. They were not on track to this year, but at the same time, they were always pesky. Like, they would always pull out wins against quality teams in the Big East that you wouldn't expect them to. They would just never have enough of those wins. And when they lose McClung and Akinjo and Josh LeBlanc, like, that was crazy to me. I was like, wow, they lost a lot, and Patrick Ewing could be in trouble. We see in the Big East, like Chris Mullen at St. John's, we saw how poorly that ended. I thought that Patrick Ewing could be going down that same direction, but all credit to him having a vision and sticking with his team and letting them buy into his vision and taking that all the way to the Big East tournament title. I think they did a really good job taking advantage of a very vulnerable Villanova team that we're going to get into when we hit their spot in the bracket. They beat a Marquette team that they were just more ready to play, and then they just dominated Creighton. That game wasn't even close. So I think the way the Hoyas are playing going into this tournament, I agree, they're going to be a trendy pick, but it's hard not to buy in. This is a very likable team.
Yeah, and they can throw a lot of different things at you, and that to me has seemed like their kind of struggle this season is which guy is going to be that guy. And right now they have a lot of guys who are trying to figure it out and get it together. And what you love about the tournament and what you asked that I noticed was that, it's like they go into that Villanova game and it's like, all right, we win this one. Let's win this one. And they pull it out, win by one. And then they get to Seton Hall and they're like, all right, let's win this one. And they're starting to buy into the system a little bit. And a coach who has done awesome things in that building. I mean, you've seen the Patrick Ewing and Madison Square Garden thing that everybody's been talking about since they won it. I mean, it's awesome. And you like to see players buy into a system and trust their coach like that. And that's what it seemed like to me, is that they were just taking it one game at a time. They understood where they were at. They understood the pressure that, might have been surrounding Ewing had they have not made that run. But now they're here, and the momentum's up, and they got a little flame under them.
Absolutely. I think another storyline I'm wanting to talk about when it comes to this region is Texas. They were a team that I was a little bit skeptical about heading into the Big 12 tournament because they were coming off of a COVID pause, and they were a little bit up and down to end the regular season. Now, they did have a big road win against Oklahoma, and I do think that helped them going into this Big 12 tournament. They pull off a nice win over Texas Tech. Kansas pulls out, so they catch a break there. But they beat one of the hottest teams in Oklahoma State. And when it comes to Texas, there's no denying the talent on this team. I think that they have three really experienced guards that a lot of people are just going to turn around and say, wow, we didn't realize that Texas has three upperclassmen guards that could all ball. Jericho Sims is another guy I really wanted to talk about. I've been so impressed with the improvement of his game. I think he could be a guy that could take over this tournament for Texas, especially when you look at Texas and some of the other bodies they have on that team. When you play Kai Jones, who's going to be an NBA first-round pick at the 4, and have Greg Brown not even playing that many big-time minutes, it tells me that really Shaka Smart knows who is good enough on this team to get the job done. I love Brock Cunningham. He is just the definition of a guy that gets every 50-50 ball. I mean, it's not an ideal draw for Texas. I think BYU, Michigan State, UCLA, whoever get there, that's going to be tough. We saw the damage that Alabama did in that SEC championship game, but at the same time, you look at Texas, I think they could be a team that when I'm looking at this region, who could make a run? I know everyone is going to be all over Alabama. I totally get it. Nate Oates, he's done great work. He's a likable coach. Michigan is obviously an appealing choice. Florida State has great athleticism. But when I look at Texas, I think they could be a team that's a little bit off the radar that could make a run.
Yeah, and they played really well in that win against Oklahoma State. And, then their ability to score in that game was kind of eye-opening because we know Texas to be this nitty-gritty team, likes to turn you over, get out, shoot threes, and, be a dog in that sense and irritate you. And they could score, and we saw the best of Coleman that night and the backcourt you were talking about. Jericho Sims, we know how good they can be, and when it's all going together, this is a team that I think is in perfect position and kind of being in the shadows right now while everyone talks about whatever surrounding Michigan and Alabama and how hot they are. I think this team is lurking, and I do like them a lot, and I think if they get the chance to play Alabama, I think that'll be one of the better games of the tournament.
Absolutely. What is your take on Alabama right now? Because I think that they're playing some great basketball, but at the same time, I don't think they got the best draw here because when you're Nate Oates, it's obvious. You've done such great work since you've gotten to Tuscaloosa, really getting everyone to buy into your program very quickly. He's obviously very ahead of schedule. But at the same time, in Alabama's first-round game, he's going to look at the opposing sideline and see a legend of a head coach in Rick Pitino. When you look at the 7-10 game, Uconn and Maryland, those are two teams that I think could actually give Alabama trouble, especially in different ways. Like Uconn, I think they have a good offensive and defensive combination to slow down Alabama, and Maryland is just tough. I don't know if they'd be able to outscore them, but you put Darryl Morsell on John Petty and try to slow them down a little bit. I'm looking forward to that one if it ends up happening. So I think that Alabama is a team to watch here, and if they get to the Sweet 16 in a possible matchup with Texas, yeah, they can make a deep run, but I wouldn't be shocked if Alabama isn't in the second weekend. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, and like you said, that seems to be where everyone's eyes went Rick Pitino in a team that wasn't even supposed to win their own conference tournament. And now the ball's rolling, and Pitino's not fazed by this thing, not at all. And Alabama we've always praised them for their depth. There's no denying that. But this is a team that seemingly has a target in its back. And whenever you enter the tournament as hot as they are, that's always going to be the case. And teams want to take you down. And I think, Pitino, the way he's rallied the troops in Iona, I think that could be a game for them. But I look forward to the teams that, the Texases, and if that is a game that we get to see, how good that'll be. But at the same time, Alabama is an incredible team with a great backcourt. Their style of play is great. Their defense is great, and they're going to be, their expectations are going to be up a little bit, I think, and I think they're capable of reaching very high heights in this tournament.
Absolutely, and I think one other theme that when I look at this bracket, I see Iona, Georgetown, and Texas, three teams that when you look at their coaching situation, it was unknown going into the season really how all three of those were going to play out. Iona, obviously, with Rick Pitino, but it's super impressive. In this dude's first year, he gets Iona to the NCAA tournament, especially considering the fact that they had over 50 days off because of COVID, and they beat a really good Siena team in that conference tournament. Look, Rick Pitino, he knows how to coach. I don't think anyone is going to deny that. And all three of those coaches, I think, deserve a lot of credit for getting their team to buy in quickly for this season, especially Texas as well. There were a lot of pressure on Shaka.
I like Iona. Haven't played a lot of games. 12-5 is their record. They have a really good guard who's capable of going off on teams. And that'll be interesting because Alabama seems to be the way you beat Alabama is you keep up with them and you play at their pace and you kind of neutralize what their guards are capable of doing. And if they can do that, Iona can be a pain in their sides for longer than the Crimson Tide would like.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the South region, and Baylor is the number 1 seed. And Chad, I'll start it off. The first thing that comes to mind when I see this region is, I see North Carolina as that 8 seed, and I'm like, wow, that is a dangerous, dangerous 8 seed that we know how inconsistent they've been all season, but wow, if I'm Baylor, you obviously can't be happy with that draw. But at the same time, I do think if Baylor beats UNC, if they could get past that 8-9 game, this region is looking pretty favorable because when you look at the 2-3 seeds, Ohio State and Arkansas, as much as I love both of those teams, I think the reason why they're so good and really why they're in this position right now, a lot of it has to do with how elite their coaching is. We know that Chris Holtmann and Eric Musselman have their teams ready to play each and every game, and they have really used that into getting very high seeds in this tournament. I think Baylor is a team, when you consider their experience and how much they're going to be playing for. The Carolina matchup worries me, but if they could get past UNC, I think this region is very favorable for Baylor.
Yeah, and for me, in looking at it, I'm thinking the same thing. And it's not so much actually it is. It's an enormous credit to Baylor knowing how talented they are. But the 2 and the 3 seed there, as much as I love Arkansas, especially in the way that they play, I just don't see how either of those teams match up with Baylor. I think I'm licking my chops. I'm pretty happy if I'm Baylor.
Well, what do you think about this North Carolina matchup? Because I think that has to be, if you have one worry, if you ask who is the biggest threat to Baylor, I think, honestly, I would answer UNC. I think that when you compare Carolina's athleticism and size to some of these other teams, I think they could be a team that maybe could give Baylor fits because we know that what makes Baylor so good is their guard play, and I get it. They would have a huge experience advantage when it comes to Butler and Teague and Mitchell against the young Carolina guards, but at the same time, Baylor, they don't have much size. I love JTT and Mark Vital as a rebounding machine, but we know Carolina, when they have a size advantage, they could be lethal on the offensive glass. We don't even know if Carolina is going to face them. They have a first-round matchup with Wisconsin, who a lot of people have been saying, okay, you get the Badgers out of the Big Ten, they'll be fine. Iron sharpens iron, and the ACC is a weak conference. I don't know how you could watch those two teams play over the past week and pick Wisconsin to win, but hey, it's March, we know. Anything could happen. So when you look at Baylor, would a matchup with UNC really get you nervous? Is that what you think the biggest threat to Baylor in this region is?
Anytime you see Roy Williams on the opposing sideline, you're threatened a little bit. And this is a team, North Carolina, that had their lowest of lows, but then we really also saw them playing their best and young in the backcourt, but talented. And if guys like R.J. Davis and those guys can play well, then why not? And we know Garrison Brooks and I love Day'Ron Sharp. Those are guys that can control the inside in games should they get it going. So yeah, you're nervous if you're Baylor, but the biggest thing with Baylor that I see that you don't see with other teams is consistency in their game in, game out mindset and the way they approach every game the same. And I think it's going to take a lot to stand in their way. I do think that there will be some really entertaining games in the path, though.
Absolutely. So I think when you look at this bracket and we see like Baylor, besides UNC, like they have a pretty favorable draw. We're on the same page there. But I think that opens up for a lot of chaos to possibly happen in this region. And I think when I look at the 11, 12, 13, and even 14 seeds in this region, I think that they could all win, honestly. I think that Utah State is a team that matches up well with Texas Tech. They're both very good on the inside in terms of defense. They are tough to score on the rim. North Texas beat a really good Western Kentucky team. They were up 18-2 in that game to start off. And even a team like Colgate, who we are very familiar with, we know that they can get hot any given night, any given time. So when you look at this region, really besides the first four teams of Baylor, Hartford, UNC, and Wisco, do you think that we could see some chaos in the rest of this region? Because I really think we can.
Absolutely, and I'm pretty sure it was the first bracket or first region I texted you about. I love North Texas. I got a chance to watch them play Western Kentucky. Really, really good player, and Javion Hamlet. And this is a team that is gritty, and they can really bother Purdue, I think. Where was I going from that? And Matt Painter, you saw Matt Painter in the interview, and I haven't really seen much of North Texas. Well, you better start studying. Utah State, I love Utah State. Love that they got their bid. And then, yeah, Colgate and Winthrop. And Winthrop's a team I've been betting on in the tournament for, I want to say a couple of years, but there wasn't a tournament last year, so the one before that. And they have a lot of those same guys. This is a very experienced Winthrop team, a very good Winthrop team that was one loss away from a perfect season. So definitely worth watching. In Villanova, we know that there is very slim margin for error now. And then Colgate. And Colgate was the same thing when they played Tennessee, and also a one-loss team. And just fun teams, man. And these are the mid-majors that you want to see and understand that can really make some noise and kill brackets early.
It's funny because throughout the Selection Sunday process yesterday, I was listening to so many podcasts and so many radios, and over those shows, they had a bunch of coaches on coaching teams in this tournament, and one of the things that I really found them all saying was when asked about their seeding, like, how do you think you got screwed? Do you think you got a poor draw? They're like, honestly, no. We are just happy to be here. We don't care who we're facing. We know it's going to be a good team. We know that they're going to show up ready to play each and every game. We know they're a team that won their way into this tournament, and I think that's what makes it so great. You see a team like Winthrop, they've lost one game. For all we know, they could be a special team just waiting to make a deep run, but their opponents, it's not their fault. They've played a handful of games over quad 4. It's just hard to really compare these low major and high major talents. But Villanova's a team that I wanted to talk about a little bit because obviously, look, we know the Gillespie injury sucked, and it's devastating to see him go down like that. Justin Moore is also super banged up. It's not looking likely that he is going to be ready to play in the tournament. But at the same time, I'll say this. I think Winthrop is the team that everyone is going to be picking. That is the most popular 12-5, and I'm not ready to just bail on Jay Wright this quickly. And there's still some talent on this team. If I'm Winthrop, I'm nervous what Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is going to do to me inside. And if guys like Samuels, if a guy like Cole Swider, who I've been a fan of for years, if he finally gets an opportunity. They also have a new point guard by the name of Chris Archie Diacono, who I know Villanova fans are very familiar with his brother. And look, I think that Winthrop is really good. But at the same time, I'm not 100% ready to bail on Villanova that quickly. And the same thing with North Texas, dude. I think that North Texas-Purdue game is going to be phenomenal. I think that Purdue is one of the more underrated teams that should be getting some more credit than they are, because I think next year is the year that if you're a Boilermaker fan, that's going to be the year when your guards have a little bit more experience to make a deep run. But hey, Matt Painter, as usual, has these guys ahead of schedule. So when you look at the rest of this bracket, is there any team, I know you mentioned Winthrop, that you're really confident in that could make a Sweet 16? You think either Winthrop or North Texas could do that?
I'm not sure to bet my money on that, but how about Utah State, man? Utah State has a phenomenal front court and are capable of playing some really good basketball. They've beaten San Diego State twice. So that's not worth overlooking. And they're very good on the boards.
They're very well coached.
Right. And Texas Tech is not. Their strengths seem to be Texas Tech's weaknesses, and I think they could really frustrate them. And then if they end up getting Arkansas or Colgate, I think that's a game that they could win until someone wants to stop them. But I think as long as they keep playing out of the inside, they could be difficult for teams like Texas Tech and Arkansas to beat.
I agree, man. I don't know if you felt this way, but I'm kind of over Texas Tech, man. Like, the more I watch them, I'm not really sold in. I like Mac McClung. I think he's a super fun player to watch, but I think Utah State, their defense against him just chucking up shots, like, that could be ugly. And look, Craig Smith, like, if I'm Minnesota, that's who I'm hiring, because I see Utah State, they're ready to play each and every game. You see their offense is very pro-oriented. It's very modern. So I like the direction of Utah State. I'm telling you, man, this region, Ohio. What do you think of Ohio State? Are they a team that you have confidence in going far? Because I feel like every time we're ready to bail on this team, they just make another run. They played really well in the Big Ten tournament, and that game against Illinois was much closer than a lot of people expected.
Yeah, no, this is a good team, and I'm not discrediting them when I talk about teams like Arkansas and Utah State even. But it's a very wide-open bottom of the bracket, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State came out on top. I think they're probably the most fit for it. That being said, you never know. When teams like Arkansas show up and can play their best basketball, same with any other team in that region. And it's tough. I do love Ohio State. I thought they played very well in the tournament, especially in that championship game. That's definitely a game they could have ended up very well lifting the trophy in. They have good inside play. They get good outside play. And when everything's going right, the Buckeyes, they can be a tough team to beat.
Absolutely. So we'll move on to the last and final region, the Midwest, and Illinois. They're the number one seed in this region, and I think the Illini are another team, right? They're playing phenomenal basketball, and it is hard to bet against them right now. But at the same time, this is another one seed that I thought got a tough draw, because Houston, I think they match up with Illinois well. I think they could frustrate the Illini a little bit. West Virginia as a 3 seed. Oklahoma State is one team that I really didn't think the committee did any favors. As a matter of fact, I would have flip-flopped in this region, Oklahoma State and West Virginia. I think the fact that the Cowboys beat the Mountaineers twice, really the last 2 games West Virginia has played, Oklahoma State has beaten them, and just the way both teams are trending right now, I was surprised by that. But at the same time, I think Tennessee, a 5 seed, this is a team that I can't quit for some reason. I was very high on them in the preseason, and I know they're not good. Like, trust me, I know they're not nothing special. But I think that their defense, if anyone could slow down Cade Cunningham, like, it could be them. We love Illinois, and they're a great team. But this 8-9 game, Loyola Chicago and Georgia Tech, those are 2 teams that I was really excited to pick to go far in this tournament. Then you look at the 6-11, San Diego State and Syracuse, those are 2 teams that could go far. I think this bracket is loaded, and even though it's going to be tough to bet against Illinois, this is just going to be full of wars.
Yeah, this is the one. This is the one we wanted to get to, and there are so many games, and no matter how the first round plays out, there will be so many good games in the second round too, and so on and so forth. The best player in college basketball is arguably in this region. You got Illinois, who's maybe the best team right now, the way they've been playing. Even Houston, maybe San Diego State is a little underappreciated in the 6 seed. West Virginia maybe is capable of beating anybody. It is really loaded, and I love that you talked on my 2 favorite games that I have to look forward to in this region. Oklahoma State and Tennessee, should that be the second round game, I think is phenomenal. And I think both of those teams really throw opposite looks at each other. I think that could be a great game. And Loyola Chicago and Georgia Tech, we haven't stopped talking about Georgia Tech for a week, and this is a tough draw. And Porter Mosher is probably a guy on his way out. Maybe Indiana's looking at him at this point, and we might get to that coaching carousel thing later. But it's a very good team, and Georgia Tech also. So that is probably my favorite game of the first round.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's cool because I think whoever wins that game, like, they're going to give Illinois a run. Like, Illinois, they better be ready to play. There are some people saying that this Loyola Chicago team is better than the one that made the Final Four a couple years ago. But another matchup we got to talk about, bro. It's Syracuse and it's San Diego State. I think this is another matchup that is super phenomenal because I'll say this, man. I love San Diego State. I think that last year they easily could have made the Final Four if we had an NCAA tournament. They were that good. I was getting ready for people to say, oh, they're like Gonzaga. They don't play against anyone. I'm going to bet against them to lose early. I was ready to pick them to go to the Final Four. I was that impressed. Now, this version, they lost Malachi Flynn. They lost Yanni Wetzel, but mainly everyone else is back. That includes Matt Mitchell. That includes Jordan Shackle. And I like this team a lot. I think they're well coached. I think they're ready to play. But at the same time, dude, I think Syracuse could be a tough matchup for them. And besides Shackle, they don't really have that many guys who could shoot. And Syracuse could easily out-athletic them. And the way Buddy Boeheim has been playing, I think this is a game between two really good teams that could go far. And this is another matchup I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, and this is one of those picks that you're making when you're filling out your bracket that just drives you crazy because you know that San Diego State or Syracuse could both easily, probably in this region, contend for a spot in the Elite Eight, but they could also lose in the first round to one another. And it's a very frustrating pick, and you can't prep for the Syracuse zone, and that's the thing. And you don't see a lot of that out west. But this is a San Diego State team that plays stellar defense themselves and does have 220, guys who can score 20 plus on you a night. And I think if they can neutralize Syracuse's offense and kind of make Buddy force the issue a little bit, then maybe they can see this one through. That being said, they'd have to also generate offense themselves, and against the zone and the team that isn't prolific from outside, maybe that could be tough. So yeah, I think we're looking at a great one right there.
Absolutely. The other team in that region is the 3-seed West Virginia. And I will say, I love the job that Bob Huggins has done this season. He deserves a lot of credit for really being able to transform his team from a squad that was really reliant on size and physical toughness to a team that is mostly known for its guard play with McBride and Taz Sherman. Both those guys are phenomenal. But at the same time, dude, West Virginia, they haven't been playing great going into this tournament. And I know they just lost 2 games to Oklahoma State, and the Cowboys are really good. But at the same time, there have been many times this season where I've watched West Virginia, and I'm like, wow, like these guys just don't play any defense at all, which is weird for a West Virginia team. But then you have Syracuse and San Diego State. I agree with you. I think whoever wins that game could definitely give West Virginia a run. The other team I wanted to talk about quickly is Oregon State. This is a team that came out of nowhere, winning the Pac-12 tournament. I think Coach Tinkle was another coach in that same category as, Patrick Ewing, Shaka Smart, guys like that, who I thought really needed to deliver on a good conference tournament week in order to get his team some momentum heading into the offseason, and he obviously did that. And look, Oregon State, they've never shown me any reason to believe that they would be able to go on and win the Pac-12 tournament, but dude, like, they have 2 guards that could really score in Ethan Thompson and in Jared Lucas. They have a big man who is one of the better rebounders and shot blockers in college basketball. I think that Tennessee, look, they've been a team I really liked all season, but like, I wouldn't be shocked if Oregon State won. And look, as much as we love Oklahoma State, and trust me, like, Mike Boynton, I think, would be in the conversation for National Coach of the Year. He's done that good of a job at Oklahoma State. But Liberty, they won an NCAA tournament game 2 years ago. Richie McKay, he knows what he's doing, and they're one of the better mid-major teams out there. I think when I look at this matchup, even Morehead State, we saw what they were able to do against Belmont, and we know how good Belmont is. Morehead State blew out Belmont. You have Clemson and Rutgers, 2 teams that aren't always used to being in this tournament setting. But look, Rutgers, they're going to be playing in their first tournament in over 20 years. They're going to be ready to play. Houston is a team that not a lot of people are familiar with. So when you look at that bottom part of the bracket, Houston, what do you think of their possible path? Do you think that they're a team that is Illinois' biggest threat? Because I'm leaning on taking them to go far to the Elite Eight. I think I trust them a little bit more than I trust West Virginia right now.
Dude, I love Houston, and I've gotten a good look at them this season, and they've been there, and they've been winning games, and they've been doing this, and they've really just gone under the radar. They're capable of getting farther than most in this tournament, and that's when things are clicking. We love Quentin Grimes. We know what he's capable of. This is a team that is very exciting and also sports excellent defense, and I think that it's the most exciting region. I think that Houston's a 2 seed, just has an awesome sound to it, and that teams are going to be wanting to stand their way. You got the Cade Cunninghams of the world. You got teams like Syracuse. You got Clemson and Rutgers, like you said. So, yeah, it should be really fun.
Before we close this pod out, I want to pick your brain a little bit about Illinois. The Fighting Illini of Illinois, they win the Big Ten tournament, and they are looking like a team that I think is starting to look like a national championship contender, man. This is going to be a team that, if you're not picking Gonzaga to win your bracket, I feel like a lot of people are going to be on Illinois. But at the same time, like, this bracket is really tough. As you said, Houston could obviously give them some threats. Oklahoma State, Cade Cunningham, in basically any matchup he's going to play, and he's going to be the best player on the floor. I love what I've been seeing from Illinois, really taking advantage of just the monster that Kofi Cockburn is. I think that he could be a guy that could become a household name for college basketball fans around America when he has a monster NCAA tournament. When you look at the Fighting Illini, how are you feeling about them comparing how well they've played recently and the rest of this region?
Yeah, I love Illinois, and they're a team that pops out to me immediately, and I like their path, and I like where they've been headed, and winning the Big Ten championship definitely reinforces that. This is a team that me and you have really been paying attention to since early in the season, so we know what they're capable of, and really they're a team that highlights the control your own destiny motto, and that's a team that can go very far in this tournament.
Absolutely, man. So, Chad, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me. Always love going over this bracket, and I'm going to have you back on next Tuesday, actually, because it's as the tournament selection is this year. You know that we're going to have games Sunday and Monday. Excuse me, Sunday and what? So we have Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday. So I'll have you on whenever that Sweet 16 is over. I just wanted to say, man, thank you so much for joining me. Always great talking brackets with you, and yeah, we'll be in touch. All right?
Yeah, we'll be talking to you all week, man. Thanks for having me yet again. Can't wait for the next one.
No problem, bro.